Good morning, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and here is your detailed forecast update for February 1st, 2025. North Queensland significant rainfall event with intense falls currently unfolding there, with record-breaking rainfall expected to develop over the next 4 days. All of that plus more coming up in today's weather forecast. If you are brand new to the channel, please consider subscribing, but let's get stuck straight into things this morning with a look at the radar imagery and the satellite imagery overlaid. You can see some really intense rainfall now streaming into the North Queensland coastline around Townsville. North of Townsville, actually up towards Cardwell, is where the heaviest falls are currently being recorded, with falls over the past 24 hours up to 380 millimeters adjacent to Townsville. So some really significant stuff. And we were saying in yesterday's forecast update that the really heavy rainfall, the intense stuff, was not actually forecast to pipe up until about today at lunchtime. So it gives you a sense of scale of what we're classing as heavy in a rainfall event like this, when 380 millimeters, I mean, it is some really intense rainfall, but it's not the stuff that we're looking for right now. We have so much more rainfall and so much more water about to get itself across the far northern and the northern reaches of Queensland, and especially for locations between Cardwell down to Ayr, including Townsville, including Lucinda, including Ingham. We're talking about some big time rainfall accumulations that are looking very likely to break records, not in terms of rainfall accumulations, but also in terms of flooding and flood waters. The rainfall and the showers are also extending south down towards Bowen. We've had some heavy falls down on the central Queensland coastline as well, also towards the Whitsundays. I could nearly call them the wet Sundays because that's exactly what they are. Around Proserpine, we've had 24-hour accumulations up to 150 millimeters. Mackay as well, between 100 and 150 millimeters, and the rainfall continuing to pile on there. You can see plenty of convection and plenty of thunderstorm activity piling on out to sea as well. I know this is a pretty slow start to the video, but plenty of convection and thunderstorms now firing up into the interior parts of the Coral Sea here offshore. That's the stuff that we're concerned about tonight. Once that gets itself dragged across North Queensland, we're going to be seeing some really big time rainfall accumulations. And zooming right in towards the Townsville area, you can see that the rainfall has only begun to really drive ashore now over the last couple of hours. It has temporarily eased off by the looks of things around the Townsville area, at least over the last couple of hours, if the latest frames are looking to load in for the radar imagery here. But in terms of current rainfall rates, we're talking about an average between 20 and 35 millimeters an hour for a lot of these locations. Magnetic Island probably a little bit higher than that right now. But yeah, you can see the rainfall now heading a little bit further towards the northwest of Townsville, so Palm Island down towards Ingham, Rollingston, these sort of areas through here. We're talking about some really significant rainfall accumulations right now, some really significant rainfall observations, and they're only going to continue being increased throughout the remainder of today. So yeah, some really wet stuff. Let's just dig straight into that forecast right now and talk about what is expected over the coming couple of hours and into the coming couple of days. In terms of rainfall, you can see that low pressure system now located over the top of Hinchbrook Island, and it is going to have an agonizingly slow motion over the next couple of days. It's going to get itself inland by the looks of things, and the low pressure system itself will actually sit inland over Mount Surprise, but come this afternoon it is not expected to budge, not move a muscle, and you can see the intense falls continuing this morning and into early this afternoon around the Townsville area. They do temporarily ease off later this afternoon, and then later on this evening it is go time again for the rainfall, with an intense line of rainfall materialising offshore from the North Queensland coastline, and then for locations south of Tully through Cardwell, Ingham, Hinchbrook Island, Palm Island, Rollingston, Townsville, right across towards Ayr, and even across towards Bowen. We're expecting widespread heavy rainfall and then localised intense falls around the Rollingston and the Townsville area for later on tonight. And these localised intense falls with widespread heavy falls penetrating inland as well, and you can see rainfall making it as far inland as about Huendon. Plenty of falls also expected around the Charters Towers and Ravenswood area as well, and then moderate to heavy falls coming in from showers also expected around the Bowen, the Proserpine, the Whitsundays, the Gargett and the Mackay areas as well. So expecting rainfall to be very widespread, even though the most intense falls will be happening pretty much exclusively between Ingham across towards Ayr, and that includes locations such as Townsville, such as Rollingston, such as Magnetic Island and Palm Island, and these are the places that we're really concerned about for rainfall accumulations. Now this rainfall does not stop at all, doesn't stop for nothing. You can see those intense falls moving through Sunday as well. We're expecting the rainfall to then finally begin easing off a little bit, at least temporarily, from about Sunday afternoon onwards, but it is just a constant stream of intense falls from later tonight right through Sunday morning into Sunday afternoon, and then later on Sunday evening, probably at around 6 or 7 p.m. at the earliest. This rainfall is then going to begin to ease off and begin to dwindle down a little bit as this low pressure system begins to pull away further inland. But don't be fooled, that's not going to be the end of the rainfall. You can see those moderate to intense falls still continuing around Hinchbrook Island Queensland, with widespread moderate falls extending between Cairns down towards Ayr, and this is going to be where far North Queensland starts to steal the show, with a bit of rainfall expected up there on the Cassowary coast. That's going to catch a lot of people off by surprise, I can imagine, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. You can see those intense falls do make a bit of a resurgence on Monday around the Ingham and the Cardwell areas. This low pressure system then begins to pull away from the coastline, and then Tuesday morning into the Townsville area, but by Tuesday afternoon the rainfall will be beginning to ease off pretty much for good through Tuesday, Wednesday, and then in towards Thursday. The rainfall, as you can see, is pretty much dropping down for good here, and then come around Friday and Saturday there'll just be some scattered showers here and there, and the rainfall pretty much dropping away, and then all throughout next week there doesn't look like there's an awful lot of rainfall on the forecast. There's plenty of solutions to this forecast as well, and by solutions I mean different forecast models. You can see the GFS and the Axis G3 all calling for pretty much an identical setup on the forecast here, just that stream of intense falls to be moving through into the central to the North Queensland area. There's really not much discrepancy. I've seen a lot of people on Facebook especially, and also the Bureau of Meteorology, say that there's some really significant uncertainty here, but there really isn't. I mean, between forecast models, yes, there are some differences and discrepancies, but it's not by a big factor here, and it's not going to have a huge bearing on what rainfall is expected. Whilst the Axis is still calling for a pretty big shift in the rainfall to be a little bit further north, between the GFS and the ESMW forecast model, they are set in stone on exactly what they expect here, just that kind of highway of rainfall to be moving through between Cardwell down towards Townsville, and it is, like I said, pretty much set in stone to be at near record intense levels throughout the remainder of tomorrow. Now, I made a Facebook post and I said 24-hour rainfall accumulations between 6 p.m. tonight and 6 p.m. Sunday night, local time that is, could threaten the all-time Australian record of 907 millimetres in a 24-hour period. I do believe that we're going to be seeing widespread falls in that time period between 500 millimetres and about 650 or 700 millimetres, with isolated pockets around Rollingstone and Montini, up around the Bambaroo area, and then in towards the Stone River catchment around the Ingham area. We've got plenty of weather stations out here, so we're not going to be short of observations, but I do have a hunch that we're going to be seeing some rainfall observations here at around that 800 to 850 millimetre mark. Now, anything over 800 millimetres is absolutely bonkers rainfall. It's not something that you see every year. It's definitely not something that you see every decade even, so this certainly is going to be one for the history books. But I do wholeheartedly believe that in that 24-hour period, with widespread falls between 400 and 600 millimetres between Cardwell down towards Ayr, and that includes Townsville, of course, we could be seeing some spot falls up to about 800 millimetres. This isn't over a matter of days, this is over the matter of a 24-hour period here, so some big time rainfall accumulations to be streaming ashore here. I know this all sounds so wacky and so intense, this rainfall. I mean, these are numbers that we've never heard before for this part of Queensland, even in the most intense of tropical cyclones or rainfall events. Yes, we've seen floods up here in far North Queensland, we see them every single year, but this is not something we see every single day, and the reason for that is just this low pressure system. It's stagnant motion, it's intense rainfall, the sea temperatures, everything, every factor about this system here is culminating into an unprecedented weather event for far North Queensland and North Queensland as a whole. This really is something to be taking very seriously, that's for sure, and the forecast models, they really can't be doing it justice at this time. The convective forecast models are also now something that I want to be taking a look at. They can do a very good job on the forecast here for rainfall events and thunderstorms, and I do actually believe that the Axis for convective forecast model here for North Queensland hasn't done a rubbish job here, and it does demonstrate what we are expecting, just heavy lines of showers to be moving ashore here. Because it is a much higher resolution model, of course, you get some pretty big discrepancies between other forecast models here, such as blank spots on the rainfall, which aren't going to happen. It's going to be a pretty solid band by the looks of things over the next 24 to 36 hours, but you can see with that low pressure system inland, we are expecting just streams upon streams upon streams of rainfall to be moving ashore, especially throughout tomorrow. Even though over the past 24 hours we've had some really wet periods, and we're expecting the rainfall to continue piling on throughout the remainder of today, the real wet day is going to be tomorrow morning. That's when we're expecting the most amount of rainfall to be streaming ashore across this part of Queensland. There's kind of no two ways about it at this time. And the North Queensland forecast model here, the convective forecast model, is kind of the only one that's making sense in terms of rainfall accumulations here. And I have to say, I actually pretty much agree wholeheartedly now with the Axis North Queensland's convective forecast here. Bar anywhere north of about Innisfail, I don't really see a world where areas around the Daintree, Dewan, Cairns, that sort of area gets more than 250 millimetres today. But I reckon for locations south of Tully here, the convective forecast model has hit the nail on the head. So Tully, Probably a bit of an outlier here, but anywhere south of Cardwell, I'm expecting accumulations up to about 700 millimetres. Cardwell itself over the next 36 hours, probably up to about 300 or 400 millimetres there, and then down towards Ingham, about 500 to 600 millimetres over the next 36 hours, probably a little bit higher than that actually around the Ingham area, closer to about 700 millimetres. Halifax, Lucinda as well, closer to about 500 or 600 millimetres, but you can see around the coastline and on the mountains adjacent to the coastline, this is where the rainfall observations really do come in clutch here. The rainfall forecasts, rather, they really make a lot of sense here. 750 millimeters over the next 36 or 30 hours, actually, not quite over the next 36. This doesn't actually include the absolute worst of the rainfall tomorrow by the looks of things, but 750 millimeters over a 24-hour period, that's absolutely ridiculous. And of course, it's kind of the only forecast model that's calling for those kind of ridiculous rainfall observations here. You can see that the ECMWF is really now on board now throughout the next 36 hours until midnight on Sunday to be calling for these 1,000 millimeter observations around Palm Island, which is entirely possible now over the next 36 hours or so. So the ECMWF and the convective forecast model with the Axis are doing a really good job here, but between other forecast models, I mean, it's a little bit of a harder sell here. The Axis not calling for much rainfall actually along the coastline, with Townsville only picking up 150 millimeters, and to be frank, that could happen in an hour. If I've left your head spinning, I just want to break this down for you town by town. That was a bit of a complicated overlook there. I might end up cutting that out of the video, but you can see in terms of those peak rainfall accumulations here throughout the remainder of this weather event here over the next just 3 days, because this is how much more time we have for this rainfall to occur here. It's not going to be happening over a week, it's going to be happening over the next 3 days. Starting from north and heading south, I reckon that this is again a bang-on representation of what's going to be happening. Tully 350 millimeters, I don't need to amend that. Cardwell about 400 millimeters, again, I don't really need to amend that as well. Ingham, I believe, is going to get more than 400 millimeters. I reckon they're going to pick up close to 750 or 800 millimeters, but the areas around Ingham into the mountainous regions there, 1200 millimeters looks to be the go at this time. Hinchbrook Island as well, especially on the leeward side of Hinchbrook Island, about 1200 millimeters expected there. Palm Island, I don't see a world where Palm Island doesn't pick up 1200 millimeters of rainfall over the next 3 days as well. Rollingstone, about 1000 millimeters expected there. Townsville as well, close to 1000 millimeters, at least 800 millimeters, but definitely around that 1000 millimeter mark. And on top of the 300 millimeters that has already fallen, that would make 4-day rainfall accumulations in Townsville pretty much a guaranteed now at about 1000 millimeters. Out towards Mount Stewart and into the Ross or into the Lake Ross area, I reckon accumulations there could be closer to 1250 millimeters or even slightly higher than that. And then as you get further towards the northwest here, I'm not really sure. I think it's around Woolshed is kind of a community out here, or some of the observations. I forget the names of them, but we're looking at accumulations up to about 1500 millimeters, and that is just the fact of the matter right now, is that these rainfall accumulations, or the observations that are going to come from these accumulations, they've never been seen before in this part of Australia. Even though we're talking about some of the wettest places in Australia here, these are still unprecedented rainfall accumulations, and there's some really good reasons for that. One of which being the stagnant motion of this low pressure system. I mean, you can see the rainfall does not move. Whilst there will be some flow in the rainfall patterns, it's stagnant between Ingham and Townsville. The rainfall rates here, the really intense stuff is going to be stagnant. It's going to be at that standstill there, and as such, really heavy rainfall accumulations are expected. The low pressure systems are going to be doing dances around each other as well, and as such, we're expecting the rainfall to continue piling on for North Queensland as those low pressure systems decide where they're going to go as they get themselves situated over Georgetown or Mount Surprise inland from far North Queensland. And the fact as well, sea surface temperatures as well pushing 30-31 degrees Celsius along the coastline, so plenty of evaporation expected right up towards the crossing of these showers as they make their crossing of the coastline. We're expecting plenty of evaporation here, which is just all going to get wrung dry by the mountains adjacent to the coastline, and as such, massive rainfall accumulations are expected. I'm going to do the same thing as what I did yesterday, and I'm going to talk about it pretty much town by town in terms of the expected flooding impacts as well. And of course, it goes without saying, if you haven't prepared now for flood, which I highly doubt considering this has been a very strongly broadcasted weather event, there's certainly not going to be many people that don't know how much rainfall is going to be coming. But if you have been following the Bureau of Meteorology forecast, it only has been yesterday when they've started to really up their rainfall numbers up into what I would class as kind of the more accurate range. But even then, calling for 24-hour rainfall accumulations of 200 to 300 millimeters, that's really light on, and they could do a bit better than that. However, who am I to say? For locations around Tully and Cardwell, I'm not expecting anything too crazy in terms of the flooding up there, but I will get to the Tully forecast in just a few moments at the end end of this video. Down in the Herbert River though, Ingham, Halifax, Lucinda, even though Halifax and Lucinda are adequately raised from the Herbert River, I'm still expecting massive losses in low-lying locations around there. And of course, Lucinda and Taylor's Beach are going to be cut off pretty much completely. Same deal with Forest Beach and other locations along the coastline. They're going to be cut off completely until probably about Thursday or so. I would be surprised if Halifax had access to the Bruce Highway as well beyond about midday today, and I reckon they're going to be cut off until probably about Wednesday or Thursday as well, when those floodwaters will recede. Those river levels rising rapidly now, and at the Halifax alert, it's now at major flooding with only about 1.5 meters to go until it gets towards the approaches, and then about 1 meter above that until it gets up in towards the town, which is of course a pretty big jump for the Herbert River, and that would break some records, that's for sure. But definitely around Ingham and Halifax, I'm expecting major losses to property from flooding, and I definitely do expect some pretty significant flooding of both Halifax and Ingham as well. Further up into the Stone River catchment, which is kind of going to be the river that's going to pick up the most amount of rainfall here out towards Bamburoo, and you can see the mountains adjacent to the Stone River, which you might be able to see just runs through here, expecting some huge rainfall accumulations through here. And whilst we're talking about those rainfall accumulations, let's talk about those observations here. I'm expecting a further at least 1,200 millimeters on top of the 300 or 400 millimeters that has fallen overnight, and as such, major to record flooding of the Stone River is expected, which flows through here into the Herbert River and then down towards Ingham, and that's going to contribute a large swathe of the water into the Herbert River. Some of the rivers and creeks flowing into the Queensland coastline here around Muttony and Rollingstone, expecting some major flooding there, if not record flooding. The Bald River adjacent to Townsville, I'm expecting major flooding to continue there as well. The Ross River hasn't really flooded yet. It does take quite a bit to flood the Ross River and Lake Ross as well, considering it's a dam, but I'm still expecting plenty of water to head in towards Lake Ross here, and as such, some really significant flooding is expected. I definitely reckon that that Lake Ross will get up towards 100% of its capacity if it's not already there already. But I mean, 1,000 to 1,250 millimeters flying off Mount Stewart and some of the mountains adjacent to Lake Ross, expecting some really big time flooding and some very powerful floodwaters to move in towards Lake Ross, and as such, a lot of water is expected to move through the Ross River in towards Townsville. I don't reckon Townsville is going to get flooded, or certainly nothing significant in the way of flooding. I do definitely expect some losses, especially in towards the eastern part of Townsville as well, where the Ross River does kind of move in towards a more sort of a slow-moving river delta sort of thing here. But some of the suburbs further off towards the west, I don't reckon we're going to be seeing too much in the way of really significant flooding there. But yeah, definitely around, here, South Townsville, Railway Estate, some really significant flooding is possible just because of how much water is going to be moving through here, and considering it is a river delta and these locations aren't raised by much from the Ross River, some really significant falls will cause some pretty major flooding in this area here. I believe through here it's the Burdekin River moving through Ayr. Some really significant flooding of that is possible at this time, but I don't expect it to get towards record levels. It takes a lot to flood the Burdekin, and there's not going to be an awful lot in the way of rainfall in the Burdekin's catchment. Definitely some significant falls expected, up to about 400 or 500 millimeters over the next 24 hours, and 72-hour rainfall accumulations could be approaching 800 or 900 millimeters. But for the Burdekin River, that's not record-breaking by any stretch of the imagination, and as such, moderate to major flooding does look to be more of the norm in the Burdekin River. It's funny how this is. I mean, moderate to major flooding is not a concern for us. We're now concerned about record water levels and major losses because of record water levels moving through some of these rivers here. So the Burdekin River's kind of taken a back seat, with only moderate flooding expected and major flooding being a possibility. And then further south, we haven't really talked about the central Queensland area around Proserpine and the Whitsundays. Proserpine's going to be picking up probably a further 700 millimeters from showers over the next couple of days, and as such, all of that water moving into the Proserpine River will cause some pretty substantial flooding there. Also, rivers around the Gargett, I forget the river that flows through Mackay, the Pioneer River, some pretty significant flooding of that is also possible up towards the minor or the moderate levels there. I don't reckon Mackay will have any losses because of flooding, however. Anyways, that does it for North Queensland. I just want to touch on far North Queensland around the Cairns area and down towards Innisfail and Tully as well, extending down towards Townsville, because I did say that I wanted to be talking about that. Coming around Sunday night into Monday, you can see the rainfall really pipes up there. Those northeasterlies and that low pressure system being over the top of Tully and Innisfail by about this point as it heads closer towards the coastline will give way to some really significant rainfall accumulations along the Cassowary coast, especially up to about Cairns. And even with northeasterly winds streaming in towards Cairns, expecting some moderate to heavy showers towards moderate rainfall into towards the Cairns area that could bring a couple of 100 millimeters there Monday morning and through Monday afternoon. The rainfall will ease out of far North Queensland come around Tuesday afternoon, but you can see still some showers and storms moving through there right out and towards Tuesday evening and into early Wednesday morning. But yeah, 2 days of rainfall here starting Monday and heading out into about Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon. We could be seeing rainfall accumulations there of about 300 millimeters on top of what already falls over the next 48 hours across far North Queensland. And as such, there is going to be the chance on top of the water that's already moving through the Tully River River and into the Johnston River, I'm expecting some really significant flooding of those areas as well. In fact, the Tully River could be approaching moderate to major flooding alerts as well come around Tuesday afternoon. And same with the rivers flowing in towards Innisfail and Fishery Falls as well, just with the rainfall that's going to be moving through this area here. It's going to be slow moving, it's going to be intense at times, and as such, rainfall observations up to about 300 to 400 millimetres expected over a 24-hour period, and that will cause some pretty significant flooding problems as well. So I just want everyone up in far North Queensland to play it safe here and keep that in the back of your mind. It's not going to be something that a lot of forecasters are talking about, considering that we're all tied up now with the Townsville rainfall as well, and I don't want to be leaving far North Queensland out of the mix as well, especially considering that there is a dramatic amount of rainfall that's expected to be moving through that area. And again, I mean, there's so many moving parts to this video, but I would just like to briefly finish off this video by talking about the fact that this system, whilst it's not expected to become a tropical cyclone, it grinds my gears when I see people on Facebook especially saying, oh, there is a slim chance of this becoming a tropical cyclone or a 30% chance or something. I mean, let's face it, it's not. It's never going to have the organisation, and I think pretty much every tracker knows that as well. You don't have to be too smart to realise, if you look at the forecast models here, that this is not a tropical cyclone right now, and it's never going to be here, even though it does have winds that are approaching cyclonic force. I mean, here you can see winds averaging 50 to 60 kilometres an hour out of the northeast, with peak gusts now moving into the Townsville area at approaching 90 kilometres an hour. So yes, it is going to feel like a tropical cyclone. There's been footage that have been sent from Palm Island and surrounding areas of the winds moving through here. They're very strong, averaging up to about 80 kilometres an hour, and the showers as well, sideways rainfall as well. I mean, it definitely does feel like a tropical cyclone for some of these locations. Really strong winds as well expected to move into this area later on tomorrow afternoon as well. You can see wind speeds there up to about 110 to 120 kilometres an hour along the coastline, but it's not organised to be classified as a tropical cyclone, but it will feel like a Category 1. It will bring a storm tide as well, about 2 feet above the highest astronomical tide, and coupled with floodwaters, that could cause some pretty significant problems around the Lucinda and the Halifax area as well, and it could back up some of the rivers as well, which will just add to the flooding problems as well, coinciding with king tides as well. So it really is all happening here across North Queensland. A very, very concerning factor indeed. But yeah, this is not going to become a tropical cyclone. However, it will feel like one, and that's something that I really felt like I had to say at the end of this video. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video to this point. I mean, it's been a very detailed forecast update. I imagine everyone watching this, especially if you're not quite in the know here, is feeling a little bit overwhelmed and a little bit upset with the system, or a little bit worried with this system. If you have prepared, you have nothing to be concerned about. There have been evacuation orders around some of the really flood-prone areas, and I imagine a lot of people have followed them, which is just really, really good to see. And of course, evacuation orders are only put into place in the absolute worst-case scenarios. I do expect some really significant flooding, and like I said, some pretty significant losses as well, unfortunately, and that is just the fact of the matter is that there will be some significant losses around the Ingham, the Lucinda and the Halifax area, just with the Herbert River and how much and how hard it is expected to flow as a result of this rainfall event here. So again, I would just like everyone to be playing it safe. Definitely no avid storm chasing or anything. This is a time to be inside, to be cracking open those beers and watching this rainfall come down. It's very important that you stay inside and you don't try anything above your capabilities, such as storm chasing or going outside for footage here, because this is an extremely dangerous situation. And like I said, this is record-breaking rainfall, never seen before across North Queensland. I do hope you've all enjoyed this forecast update as well. I'm planning on releasing another one later on this afternoon, covering in the ins and outs as this rainfall begins to pile on for real up in far North Queensland, because this is when the real stuff is expected to come ashore, is later on this afternoon and evening. But that is all from me this morning. I do hope you found this informative or useful, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.